So next up we have Deborah Humphrey. So Deborah has extensive experience working in mental health settings, supporting patients and employees, firstly as a nurse and secondly as a senior leader. In April 2019, she set up her own coaching and wellbeing business, the Wellbeing Story. Deborah supports organisations and individuals to help them explore culture, wellbeing and development. So Deborah, good morning, how are you?
Hello, I'm really well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, good. Good to see you.
Yeah, great start so far. Really interesting.
Can you hear us well?
I can. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Good. Thank you.
Emma?
Hi, nice to meet
Hi,
you.
Emma. Yeah.
So you've got a presentation you want to deliver, so we'll leave you to it, Deborah. We'll come back to you with some questions at the end. We may.
Yes, I'm going to share my screen, hopefully. There you go. Can you see that?
We certainly can, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to go? Perfect.
Yeah, brilliant. So thank you very much. I wanted to talk today about virtual wellbeing. I think we've had some hints of this from Dom and from Gary, and just the challenge of how we do support colleagues who are nearly always online. I think some companies are trying to bring people together once a week, but not all are achieving this. So I think wellbeing was something we perhaps didn't consider at the end of last year, or if we did, we didn't consider it in such a focused way. A lot has changed from how we checked on employees. So I want to just touch on that and talk about what we can do and how we as leaders can be role models, and a few little exercises. So I wanted to start with a little exercise actually that you as leaders can do for yourself when you're feeling stressed, tense, another Zoom meeting. So as you're sat down, I'd just like you to ask yourself the question, what could you do less of now? So as you're sat, think about your posture. What would you do less in your chair at the minute? Whether it's your breathing, get yourself a bit comfortable. And just enjoy the thought of doing less. And this is a really simple exercise that you can do anytime. You can share it with your teams, your employees. You could do it in a one-to-one. And I think it's a go-to exercise, especially, you know, when you're thinking, oh my God, another Zoom meeting. So moving on about what we did about wellbeing in our old world, in 2019, we've perhaps had a strategy. Some companies don't. I know health services often have wellbeing strategies, but basically we saw people, we could check in with them. We had that visual communication. Richard talked about looking in the whites of people's eyes. I still believe we can do that on Zoom, but I think it just takes a bit more effort, and then for leaders that becomes more tiring in itself. So we know that the workforce has changed. Last year we had people advising us not to spend so much time online, but now we're spending all our life online. And the challenges for us and our teams are increased anxiety, mood changes. You know, we know what it's like. We're working from home. We've got kids, or we've had kids around us all the time. Got people ringing the doorbell. I'm saying that, expecting mine to go at any second now. We're just generally distracted as we're performing. There's fewer barriers, and some of the evidence is showing that employees overshare. That social barrier of being at work, where we've got the sort of social norms, has disappeared. So we might have people becoming more emotional online, and that's certainly been my experience. So I'm going to talk about some things we could do about that. I think the other thing which is really important is the physical boundaries of work has changed. We're not coming into work, we're not making the same effort to go and get the bus, to drive, and we don't leave work. It's all within our house. And I think we've heard Gary talk about Zoom fatigue, and obviously that applies to other online platforms. So, you know, yourself, you know, that feeling of exhaustion that comes at the end of the day. I find working on Zoom all day in my room much more exhausting than going into work. So I'd just like yourself to check at the moment with yourselves, do a check-in around these points. The Mental Health Foundation has really started to think about how we support people to work online. So as you're working during the day, think about, how do you move? How often are you spending sat, probably with not very good ergonomics, at your desk without getting up? We talked about the water cooler meetings. You know, we're not doing that now. How often do you plan the day with starting and finishing times? Or is it just, you know, I know a colleague who has the computer in their bedroom, it's the only space they have, so they kind of roll out of bed straight into work. There is no boundary about when you start, when you finish. Work is always there now, it's part of your domestic environment. How often do you take a break and eat properly? We know that people don't take time out to go get some fresh air, perhaps walk to the sandwich shop. We know in London the impact of this on the economy. It's easy just to get sucked into your work environment, you and the computer as your main relationship. And how often do you reflect on your day? When we don't have people beside us all the time, it's really difficult not to sort of that slump in the desk and say, I've had a really rubbish day at the end of the day. Or conversely, I've had a really great day. So some of the things that you can do about this in meetings. So I've put meetings here, but this could be either a one-to-one or a group meeting. Think about how you check in. How do you start your meetings? We've heard about efficiency of this new way of working, but have we become too smart, too efficient, that we're not spending time checking in with each other? There's a woman called Nancy Klein who has done some work on thinking organisations, and this is maybe something you would want to ask yourself, are you a thinking organisation? And their practice advocates spending 2 minutes with a colleague, just listening to them, letting them say whatever's on their mind, and then swapping over. So you can do this in breakout rooms, and then giving somebody an appreciation, saying you've appreciated what they've said. What's important about these type of conversations is you don't interrupt. What would you know? How would you tell if somebody is feeling wound up? We can tell, we can look at people's postures. If you see people sitting slumped on the desk, their eyes closed, it's okay to check in. Do you have meeting ground rules? You know, do we see what we saw on the TV last night with Trump and Biden, just a complete talking over each other? What are the ground rules? What are the parameters that your employees are working with? And linked to that, does everybody have a voice? Do you have a rule about video on and video off? And actually, if somebody who works for you has always got the video off, but listening to the meeting, how do you know they're there, engaged? Is this something you would check up with them? And I don't mean in a kind of punitive way, but what is it that's stopping them engaging fully in the meetings with you and your colleagues? And is there a social element to the meeting? The idea that this meeting is very efficient perhaps stops that social chit chat. You know, what we used to have is people would wander into meetings, people were there early, they'd have a little chat. There is a way you can deal with this by adding on 10 minutes at the end of your meeting and asking people to stay, having a cup of tea, bringing their coffee in at the end. 10 minutes with your colleagues at the end of a meeting isn't a long time. And it's just a way of saying, I'm still here, I'm still around, let's have a chat. And I think you can then ask some more informal questions that you may be feeling quite anxious about talking about. So what can you do? And I think what's really key for us as leaders is to be bold. Do check out and use our intuition. You know, if we think somebody's behaving slightly different, we can check out. We can do that in a very open way. We can, you know, suggest, you know, how are you doing? I'm noticing you're not quite the same, or you're looking a bit tired today. Show you're interested. Be bold in the way you hold meetings. Maybe think of a wellbeing strategy that's based around people working online. That's a way to show your team that you've thought of them, you've thought of what you can do together, you've got some goals there. Be a role model.
I was wondering if you've heard of any innovative ways during this time that people have stayed connected to each other, or anything that people have been doing that you think that's really good best practice.
Organisations like NHS England, who have brought people together for these Wellbeing Wednesdays. It's really clear that people are not online. They make it fun as well. They use a lot of avatars, that people communicate through avatars. And I was a speaker there, and it was a bit bizarre, I must say, as a speaker, because I kept having these funny pictures zooming into my talk, but it had a sense of camaraderie about it. There was time at the beginning for people to come in and just chat before the speaker. I think there's organisations who are absolutely building in to their weekly timetable social activities, and whether that is a check-in, whether that is just the virtual tea break, virtual lunch, and using, you know, the features on whatever online platform you have for people to be able to break up into breakout rooms. One of the things that I do when I run groups, and I co-facilitate a regular group with a colleague, is we acknowledge at the beginning that sometimes people are finding it very difficult to work online. So one of us becomes the well-being person, and I think businesses can do this. So if people are feeling distressed or irritated, they contact an individual. So if there was two of you, I might be then sending a message privately to Richard, who I could then ring up and have a chat with. And that's been really, really effective, that you have an identified person within the meeting.
And you were talking about Zoom fatigue, and I'm sure it's going to be something we're going to hear a lot of today. Do you think it's a difference if you're an introvert and an extrovert to suffering from this?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I think that people of the whole range find it very tiring. We know that spending too much on, you know, time online isn't very good for us. But if you think of the visuals or actually staring at the screen, that's exhausting. The different colours, we're trapped in rooms. So I think it affects everybody. I think in terms of whether some people prefer working from home on their own, I think that might appeal to a more introverted nature rather than that being the issue of the Zoom.
And who looks after the wellbeing coach, Deborah?
Pardon?
Who looks after the wellbeing coach?
Well, I think there is something about practicing what you preach. I have a really good network of colleagues who I regularly chat with. I have a virtual coffee morning with some colleagues every Friday where we just, you know, are irreverent.
And they're good support for you, obviously.
Yeah, they are. It's really, well, it's not work. It's that letting off steam. Perhaps what you used to do, you know, as you walked to the sandwich shop, as you went outside and got a bit of a breath of fresh air. So they're really something I look forward to.
Fantastic. So in terms of, sorry, I popped out for a few minutes, so apologies if you've covered this off already, but in terms of contacting you about your services, Deborah, what's the best way to do that?
Well, I've got a website, the Wellbeing Story, which I think is on the bio. Either through that, or I'm happy to share my telephone number if people want to contact me.
And what's the normal process in terms of engaging with you and size of, I mean, I presume it's anybody, any firm size or an individual that can engage with you?
I do packages with organisations around wellbeing, where I'll help them think about a wellbeing appraisal, help them develop a wellbeing strategy, or I'll do one-to-one with individuals if they feel that the individual's struggling. It's not counselling, it's not therapy, it is more about thinking, okay, we're here and now, what can we do to support you move forward? How would you like to be? And using the natural strengths. I tend to use quite creative techniques such as writing, sometimes photography, and using sort of metaphor to help people express themselves. So I'm happy to do either groups, strategy, or individual work.
And if you could give our viewers a couple of tips to sort of take away with them from today that they could maybe test out just to see whether maybe engaging with you beyond today would be of use to them, what would you advise?
Sorry, some tips that they can do for themselves and for their own well-being?
Yeah.
Well, I think the first one was asking that question, what can you do less today in the moment while you're sitting down, which is based on just helping you relax and breathe, noticing your body. So if you're sat with your legs crossed and your shoulders a bit hunched, sorry, I'm looking at you, Richard, can you just do a bit less?
Most comfortable for me.
But what happens is
I hunched as well.
a little.
There we go, is that better?
Well, if you can relax in your chair, just do a bit less with those muscles and see how it feels. You could try, and this is a interesting technique which does work, doing something called 5 minutes free writing. So when you're feeling really pent up, really worked up, just get pen and paper, not the computer, and just time yourself, write for 5 minutes, whatever is in your head. It can not worry about grammar, spelling, and then you can scrunch the paper up and throw it away. And move. I think move and hydrate are really key things. Really simple takeaway tasks that you can do and remind yourself to do.
Water bottles, I'm 1 out of 3 so far.
Your posture's getting
I must admit, I find this more uncomfortable than sat with my legs crossed.
Pardon?
I must admit, sat with my legs down is more uncomfortable than legs crossed. But
I think it's just thinking about your muscles and breathing, and not sat in a position that's not very ergonomic.
I'll try it.
Sorry.
No,
you have to relax, Richard.
No, bless you. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Deborah. Did you have any final questions for Deborah at all?
No, I just found your presentation really useful. Thank you.
No, really appreciate it.
Thank you for the invite.
No, pleasure. And hopefully you can stay with us and catch up with some of the other presenters later. Thanks, Deborah. Take care. Cheers. Bye-bye.